As he's done so many times before, Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis is flexing his state muscle to address an issue where many see federal failure. Hey everybody, Damon Roberts here, and we've got to talk about the governor of Florida because I've been talking about this on the show now for months. When was somebody going to run to the right on COVID fascism, take up the mantle, and fire shots across the bow? Well, that's exactly what we got yesterday from the governor of Florida. But I want to remind you first, this video, as always, is brought to you by Mike Lindell and our sponsor, MyPillow. Go to mypillow.com/LFS6B for all the best deals for the LFS6B audience. And folks, you don't have much time left in the holiday season to get those orders in if you want to get them for Christmas. So go to right now, mypillow.com/LFS6B. Use our promo code LFS6B at checkout for 10 to 60% off most items. All right, we got to talk about the governor of Florida because once again, he flexes his state muscle to address an issue where many see federal failure. Yesterday, impaneling a state grand jury to investigate whether drug makers and federal agencies hid potential risks or problems posed by the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines. Now, this is a power move by the governor of Florida. He announced it yesterday, and this could reshape the debate over whether federal science agencies and drug makers can share legal blame for any harms the vaccines are believed to have caused. Now, it also opens a political avenue to attack Donald Trump's administration for its warp speed program to approve the vaccines on an accelerated timetable. And listen, we don't know if the governor is even going to run for president. We know President Trump is running. He's already announced that. And listen, this is one of the things that if we're going to be honest about it, this is one of the things that President Trump is going to have to deal with. He's going to have to figure out what his messaging is going to be on the vaccines. I believe public sentiment in vaccines right now is much different than the last time the president was really asked to speak on this when he actually spoke in public. Now, we can separate, I think the president's going to have to separate Operation Warp Speed and getting them done and then what the end product actually was that came out to the public that's been used and how it's been used. Now, we know the president is against mandates. He's already said he would never have mandated them. We all know that, and we would expect that. But I do think the president's going to have to figure out his messaging on the vaccines, the quality of the vaccines, the obviously the supposed harm that we've seen from that vaccines, everything that's going on in the public sphere right now with vaccines, with these injuries, with people dying, with myocarditis, with the scientific community that, let's face it, in the Trump administration, there was not a lot of outside voices. Now, I don't put that on the president. I put that on Fauci, the CDC, and everybody else involved, the bureaucrats. But listen, this is messaging that's going to have to be dealt with in any kind of primary in the coming 2024 race. If the president's going to be up there, everyone's going to come at him. Everyone's going to have different views. Now, the governor of Florida really so far has been the only one who seemingly wants to take up this mantle. It's seemingly that the Republican Party is pretty weak on deciding how far they want to go with speaking out against COVID fascism that we've seen in biomedical tyranny that we've seen with these vaccines. So the governor obviously shots across the bow, impaneling a grand jury. Now, this could also impact the 2024 race. So DeSantis obviously challenged Trump and the GOP, as we're saying, loaded with conservative voters that have long aligned with Trump, who also harbor distrust of the federal government's approval process for the vaccines and Big Pharma's profit motives in the aftermath of the opioid epidemic that we've been seeing as well. Now, normally vaccine safety is an issue, obviously left to the federal regulators like the FDA and the CDC, but DeSantis is injecting himself into the debate, declaring alongside his Surgeon General on Tuesday that state law prohibits drug makers from making false or misleading statements about drug or vaccine safety. So that's how they're going to get this. This is how they're going to get this panel. They say making false or misleading statements is against the law in Florida when it comes to drug or vaccine safety. I have the video of the governor. We'll watch it here in a second from yesterday. In the filing to the state Supreme Court, his administration played to populist distrust of drug companies, as well as casting doubt on the vaccines, which federal officials belatedly admit, now they admit it now, don't stop transmission or don't stop infection. but simply lessens severe symptoms for many. But again, as you'll see in some of the clips we'll play here, these doctors say the most important thing they can get is patient data. Patients who have had an adverse reaction to the vaccines, they want to know why. Is it one certain age group? Is it another certain age group? Did they have comorbidities? Is there a running theme between the people who had problems and not? What is it? Well, they can't get it, as you'll hear in this clip. Moderna, Pfizer, keeping it secret. Keeping it secret. The governor of Florida says we'll get it whether they like it or not. These authorizations are based on robust and independent evaluation of the scientific data on quality, safety, and efficacy, including our landmark phase 3 clinical trial. A Pfizer spokeswoman said, well, what would you expect them to say? Data from real-world studies complement the clinical trial data and provide additional evidence that the vaccine provides effective protection against severe disease. So they've changed the nomenclature. They've changed how they message on this. Now it's going to stop you from getting it. Now it's not going to be if you get vaccinated, you're not going to catch COVID. Now it's going to just stop you from severe disease. One issue officials said Florida is likely to investigate is whether federal agencies or drug makers withheld data affecting Americans' ability to judge the safety or efficacy of the inoculations. Folks, I would put a 99.9% chance on that it's already true. How do I know that? Because we already know they've withheld data. We've seen clips of other hearings. We know they've withheld data. They wanted to wait 98 years to put out whatever it was that they, some of the research findings from some of this stuff. So we know they've held data. There's no doubt about it. The only issue is going to be whether the governor of Florida or anyone else, Elon Musk, maybe at Twitter, anyone else can actually get to it. What was the messaging at the time? Who was trying to hide what? We know they did that. It's just now a matter of whether we can find it. On that front, the conservative watchdog group Judicial Watch released documents Tuesday. It showed that data Moderna submitted to the FDA reported a statistically significant number of rats were born with skeletal deformations after their mothers were injected with the vaccine. The documents also reveal Moderna elected not to conduct a number of standard pharmaceutical studies on the laboratory test animals, the group said. Quote, the vaccine companies are saying, well, no big whoop, that's not necessarily tied to the vaccine. That was Tom Fitton, who told our own John Solomon in Just the News, on Just the News, Not Noise, every night at 6 o'clock on Real America's Voice. Others would suggest otherwise, he said. That is a warning sign about the safety of the vaccines. The point in this debate is this, should have been when we first asked for this material, rather than it taking 18 months in a federal lawsuit to get basic information out about the vaccines, we should have gotten it then, of course. And I still think they're going to have problems, obviously, getting it now. Tom Fitton said that the DeSantis grand jury opens up a whole new untested area for a slate to challenge federal authorities on vaccine safety. He said, quote, this is the most important medical treatment, arguably in the history of modern man, these vaccines, and we're just finding out basic information about how they were tested and what the results were, he said. And folks, I played that clip of Anthony Fauci talking about going from what we've always done to get to a vaccine, going to mRNA, how long he thought that would take back in 2019. He thought that would be a 10-year transition. Now, of course, I know they've been working on it for years, so who knows when the 10-year starts, but realistically, we all know this was an extremely rushed process. There is no way they felt comfortable going to market with these, that they were absolutely like your typical phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 efficacy, safety, data. We know that didn't happen. Tom Fitton said it's going to be a big legal question as to whether these companies or anyone else has liability over the misleading information that we've too often never received related to these. What Justice Alito famously called irreversible medical treatments. And did federal law preempt Ron DeSantis or Florida state officials' ability to enforce consumer fraud and other statutes in a way that protects citizens there in Florida? That's going to be the question that the governor is going to want answered. That's going to be very interesting to see how that turns out. While the legal front evolves, there are significant political considerations to the DeSantis strategy should the Florida governor enter the 2024 presidential race, as some expect he will. President Trump already declared for 2024, and he has touted his record of developing the vaccines in record time through a public-private partnership with the drug makers. DeSantis, who famously fought federal vaccine mandates on the grounds that people should have the freedom to choose what to inject in their bodies, could dent the Trump vaccine legacy if he can show safety was put at risk in the name of that warp speed. That equation, however, won't be known until the grand jury gets the evidence and makes assessments as to whether the state's consumer laws were violated and whether citizens were deprived of the right to make informed decisions. No matter how that turns out, DeSantis' move is already winning conservative converts, including in Trump world. And that's because no one else in the Republican Party has taken this issue on. They want to stay away from it. It's like the third rail. Yes, they give you an on the surface talking about how, this is not right, this is wrong, people should have this freedom, that freedom, this. But nobody is taking up the mantle of saying, never again, we're going to go find out what these guys did, and we're going to hold them responsible. The governor of Florida, as of yesterday, has decided he is going to take the first steps in doing that. All right, let's take a look at some of the really important parts, I think, of the governor, what he said yesterday, and really how on it Florida was throughout this. Here's some of yesterday's hearing.
Part of the reason why we in Florida rejected things like mandates and banned things like vaccine passports. You know, if you look, Stephen, what he said was, well, he got the booster because he was going to travel. So what you had is you had a lot of elites in this country trying to condition society so that if you didn't bend the knee, then you were basically a second-class citizen. And so in Florida, we rejected that and made sure that people could make their own decisions. And I think that this is part of the reason why, is because, like, how could you use either coercive power of the state or use, private sector collusion to force a choice on someone without having any idea how that's going to impact that particular individual. And so we wanted to make sure we were empowering individuals with the ability to make these decisions. And, part of this issue and other issues with COVID, goes back to an attempt to enforce one acceptable narrative on all these issues. And, you saw it with the censorship of Dr. Bhattacharya with Twitter. You also saw it with Dr. Fauci and some of these people saying that they needed to go after these people who wrote the Great Barrington Declaration. They wanted to not contest the ideas in that. They basically wanted to smear them because they didn't want to have any criticism of their lockdown policies. And so part of the reason I think it's been a bad response is because from the very beginning, you've had a lot of arrogance that it's our way or the highway, and anyone that offers any type of a dissenting opinion. And they were censoring from day one. People that would write anti-lockdown things in March of 2020, April 2020, some of those would get taken down off some of these big tech platforms. And so we saw that over and over again. And I think that ultimately, your policies or your positions or your analysis of this medical science should stand on its own. And if it's not able to accept criticism, if you can't defend the policy against valid criticism, then maybe you need to be looking in the mirror. But that's not what these elites wanted to do. They wanted to just cocoon themselves from any criticism and to try to denigrate anybody that had a different way of thinking. So I think with the Twitter, what Elon Musk is doing, I think there's going to be a lot more that comes out with that. And I think that that's very important. But I think it's also important to say, Twitter is not even close to most of the censorship, what was going on. They're a much smaller company than like a Google or YouTube or some of these others. And I guarantee you everything that was going on in Twitter is going on in these others, if not even more so. And we got a sense of that when they went after us for having the opposing the masks, having the experts oppose the masks for these young kids. We are actually going to be moving through the legislature this year, in the upcoming legislative session in the spring, a bill that actually protects physicians' First Amendment rights, and it protects their right to dissent from orthodoxy and the establishment. And Joe and I endorsed this bill last year. It didn't quite get across the finish line, but I'm confident with our new leadership it will. And this is just something where, Pediatrician should be able to say that kids don't need to be wearing masks without fear of reprisal just because some of the higher ups are bent on imposing this on people. Same thing with these mRNA shots. All the stuff that we've seen, most of the people who got it right were in the minority when it came to some of the professional opinions, or at least the outwardly spoken minority. There may have been a lot of people that just weren't willing to speak out and were quietly dissenting from Fauciism, but of the people that were willing to speak out, they were a minority at the time on all issues, and yet they've been proven right. So we look forward to being able to sign that into law later this year. It kind of comes from some of the stuff we've heard with silencing of opinions. I think a lot of unethical behavior by some of the medical association and establishment. Of course, when you have something like mRNA and these companies have made a fortune off this, federal government imposing or at least attempting to impose mandates, and a lot of false statements that were made over the last year and a half, almost 2 years, saying that it would end COVID, saying you won't get infected, telling people, young people, that you need to get it so you protect your elderly parents, minimizing any discussion of any type of adverse impacts when it comes to mRNA shots. And so you've seen a lot of this. And I think people want the truth, and I think people want accountability. So you need to have a thorough investigation into what's happened with these shots. We also need ways to get more data so that we can better evaluate what actually happened. And the fact of the matter is we lack comprehensive patient-level data from the pharmaceutical industry, and that makes it very difficult for independent researchers to check the integrity of these shots that have been so pushed on Americans.
This is a really, really important question, because maybe it's all the harm's happening in the elderly and it's an acceptable amount of harm. But the reason we can't do it is because of just what he mentioned here, this patient-level data. That allows us to see how old they were, what kind of risk factors they have. Pfizer and Moderna have this is hidden data, secret data. We're not allowed to touch it. So that's been how long ago the vaccines were released, and independent researchers aren't being given access to the data to figure out if these things are safe. Why? And we actually sent an open letter we published in the BMJ, an open letter to the and Moderna, asking them to release this data, and we didn't get a response. However, today, I'll let them know if they're watching. The invitation is still open. We would love to do the study on that data.
Well, maybe what we're doing today, we'll be able to get the data whether they want to give it or not. Because in Florida, it is against the law to mislead and to misrepresent, particularly when you're talking about the efficacy of a drug. We see just recently, Florida got $3.2 billion through legal action against those responsible for the opioid crisis. And so it's not like this is something that's unprecedented. So today, I'm announcing a petition with the Supreme Court of Florida to impanel a statewide grand jury to investigate any and all wrongdoing in Florida with respect to COVID-19 vaccines. And we anticipate that we will get the approval for that. That will be something that will be impaneled, most likely in the Tampa Bay area, and that will come with legal processes that will be able to get more information and to bring legal accountability for those who
All right, folks, there you
committed
have it. A very important hearing. You heard the doctors there. The data is what they need. They want to find out why certain patients had problems, why some have had adverse effects. Is there something that links them all together, or is there not? That's all very, very important, because let's face it, these people are still pushing all of this. They haven't backed off. It's gas pedal to the metal for these people, whether it's shutting down businesses, whether it's masking your kids in school, whether it's pushing these vaccines, whether it's pushing these boosters. Nothing has changed. It's COVID then, COVID now, COVID forever. Let's hope more red state governors around this country follow the lead as they have for the last 4 years, at least some of them. More of them need to, of Governor DeSantis. All right, that's going to do it for this video. Again, follow our sponsor, Mike Lindell, mypillow.com/LFS6B. Get your Christmas orders in now if you want them for the holiday season to get them in time. mypillow.com/LFS6B. LFS6B is the code at checkout for 10 to 60% off, and I'll see you in the next one.